Jason, might just want to say why we're waiting. You might want to just say why we're waiting for the benefit of anyone who's watching at home or Dennis Clowers.
Okay. So we are waiting on a quorum, but we do know we have another trustee on the way. Okay, I'd like to call the January 7th meeting of the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority to order. As we can see, we are without our chairperson or our vice chair for today's meeting. So the first order of business that we'll need to take care of is electing a chair for this meeting.
I would like to nominate Laura Johnson as the chair of this meeting.
I'd like to second it.
All right, all in favor? Voice vote?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, it passes unanimously, so I will turn the meeting over to Chairwoman Johnson.
Thank you. Our first item this morning is items from chairman. I don't have any. Next item is residents to be heard. Do we have any residents who have signed up to be heard? Hearing none. The next item is approval of the minutes of December 3rd, 2021 COTPA board meeting. If I could get a motion. And that passes unanimously, right? Okay, we'll go with that. Next, we have the consent docket, which can be moved in whole unless there are items that anyone wishes to discuss. I would entertain a motion for the consent docket. And the consent docket is approved. Next is items for individual consideration. The first is amendment number 1 to interlocal service agreement with the City of Norman for provision of transportation services by Embark, adding washing and fueling services. Estimated revenue increase $97,015, retroactive to January 1 of 2022 through June 30 of 2022. Jason, do you have any comments about this?
Yeah, a few comments. So this amendment is just a continuation of our partnership with the City of Norman in providing transit services to the residents of Norman. As the trust knows, we've been in an agreement with Norman for the last several years, providing primarily transit operations. So operating the buses, driving the routes, serving the customers. All of the maintenance, on the other hand, has been handled by the City of Norman. Well, we have an opportunity now, again, with our partners of the City of Norman and the new maintenance facility that they're constructing as a city facility. We are able to move our staff and our operations into that new facility, and as such, because we'll have more capabilities within that building, the City of Norman has actually asked us to take over the fueling and the cleaning of the buses. So whereas we were just providing really the operations, we're starting to ease into some of the maintenance, again, limited to fueling and washing of the buses. So with that, with the approval of this item, the contract, of course, would be amended. As you know, our agreement with Norman is a full cost recovery of our expenses. We've estimated our expenses to come back in the form, of course, of revenue to us as a reimbursement of $97,015, and that's really just for the remainder of this fiscal year. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Are there any questions? Hearing none, we can entertain a motion. It's been moved and seconded. And the item passes. The next item on our agenda is amendment number 3 to contract for engineering services with Hntb Corporation, project MC0619, Northwest Bus Rapid Transit Project, to provide surveying and right-of-way services, a cost increase of $114,260. Jason?
Yeah, so this amendment to the contract with Hntb is really for the purpose of adding or changing 3 particular parts of the project. They're listed in your memo there, and I'll talk just briefly about them, but just thinking about the process, as you know, Hntb is our engineer for the BRT project overall. Staff and consultants have presented preliminary reports. We've presented the 60% plans. As you know, we've had several public engagement opportunities. And so with these projects, as we get into further along in the design, changes are often made. And so we're needing to amend the contract by $114,000 to account for some of the changes that we're making to the project, really that came out of the 60% design plans that the trust reviewed. And again, they're listed in the memo. One of those is to design sidewalk along the Northwest Expressway connecting Villa to Pennsylvania Avenue. As you recall, we are shifting one of the stations on Northwest Expressway in Penn. We are shifting that a little bit further west from the intersection so that it works a little better with the development that is going in at that location. And then finally, we are looking at needing some additional right-of-way acquisition services that then was in the original contract. So those are the three main tasks, if you will, that the architect or the engineer is accomplishing for that additional $114,000. That takes our total cost to $1.9 million. And as a reminder, the majority of this engineering contract is funded with federal funds.
Are there any questions for Jason?
Just a compliment to Jason and any staff, anyone in the city who worked to, no offense to the other, the Second and Third Amendment here, but that one on the sidewalk along the north side of Northwest Expressway connecting Penn to Villa. I really appreciate you all taking time to look into that. My hope and I think guess is there will be families who will get off the BRT at Pennsylvania and walk down to the new Belle Isle renovations for that library. And I just think that was a very important connectivity piece. So I just really want to say thank you for taking time to look into that for us.
Thank you for that comment. Are there any other comments, questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion. And that item passes. The next item on our agenda is item C, final plans and specifications for project number MC0681 Regatta Park Improvements, Zone G, Boathouse District, and authorize the administrator to advertise for bids. Estimated construction cost $335,750.
Yes, we have Corey Hubert that'll talk a little bit about this one, if you don't mind.
Good morning. Improvements will be made to the parking lot area in which we'll remove and replace fence posts, barrier cables, mill and replace asphalt, and restripe the parking lot. And then in the landing area, there's some damaged grout, mortar, stones in the walls and building facade that will be replaced and removed and replaced. And then make other repairs to brick pavers and stairs. The total cost of $335,000 includes 2 add alternates. Happy to explain the add alternates if you like.
Are there any questions for Corey? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion on this item. And the item passes. Next item on our agenda is joint resolution with the City of Oklahoma City, authorizing and approving the transfer of title to Union Station by quitclaim deed, which is attached, from the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority to the City of Oklahoma City, subject to the continued public use of the property for 5 years from the date of acceptance by the City of Oklahoma City and approving the lease agreement with the City of Oklahoma City to lease Union Station, 300 Southwest 7th Street, Oklahoma City, for a 6-month term ending June 30, 2022. Jason?
Sure. A few comments on this one. So this should be a very familiar item to the trustees. We've talked about it off and on over the last few years as we've negotiated with the FTA to transfer that property. But more recently, during the last month's COPPA meeting, we actually presented the quitclaim deed to the trust. After that action was taken, as we started thinking through the logistics of continuing to occupy that facility until the city was and Scissortail Foundation were really ready to program that and move forward with any improvements, we determined that it would be in the best interest of COTPA and the city to also enter into a lease agreement, so that although we're transferring ownership to the city via quitclaim deed at the same time, because we're executing a lease agreement, COTPA can maintain control of that facility, at least for the rest of this fiscal year, right? And so we're bringing this item back to the trust with the quitclaim deed and now a lease between COTPA and the city. The lease is essentially no cost, but it does allow COTPA to continue to control the facility. We do have staff there. We'll continue to maintain it through the remainder of the fiscal year. But again, a really, I think, significant item for us here, for the city, for the park, being able to transfer that ownership to the city so that the highest and best use of that facility can be realized within our community. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions you have.
Do any of the trustees have questions regarding this item? Okay, then I would entertain a motion. Are we moving these as two separate pieces? Just one, okay. Sounds good. And that item passes. The next item on our agenda is the ratification of payroll and vendor claims for the period December 1st, 2021 through December 28th, 2021. One of our most important jobs, paying the bills. Are there any questions about this item? I would entertain a motion. And that item passes. Next, we receive our financial reports, the COTPA schedule of revenues and expenditures, budget to actuals for the month ended November 30th, 2021. Jason, do you have any remarks?
Yes, I'd like to share a few remarks, and I understand that we are pressed a little bit for time in terms of maintaining a quorum, so I'll limit my comments to the transportation operations and to the parking operations, and happy to answer any questions, of course. But I did want to, if I could, direct your attention to page 2. This is the transportation operations budget to actual. A couple things to mention. If I could direct your attention to the very bottom line of the report, operating loss or income, you can see that through 5 months of the fiscal year, we currently have revenues in excess of expenditures by about $756,000. Looking up at the revenues, I want to mention the state government subsidy. You'll notice it's showing to be $1,065,000 under budget. Probably worth an explanation there, and that is we receive a payment from the state every year. In this case, it's projected to be $1,065,000. We had projected to receive that revenue in November because that's when we received it the previous fiscal year. We actually ended up receiving that revenue in December. So it has been received, just not in the month that we had originally projected that it would come in. So in December's financial report, you'll see that revenue is being received. And then also want to talk a little bit about our expenditure categories there. You can see we have personal services and supplies. in particular. Personal services, we're at about 100% of our budget. Supplies, we currently show to have about $177,000 in savings. But again, just to give the trustees a heads up of what you can expect to see on the December financial, because we do monitor this closely, not just once a month. What I can tell you is that in December, the personal services is going to change rather significantly, and that will probably project being over budget. And that's really a result of the pay increases that were approved by the trust that were realized in December, right? So eventually, I mean within the next month or two, we will need to bring a budget amendment to the trust to account for those extra personnel dollars. So again, just letting you know that when you see the financial next month, you're going to see a rather significant change in personal services. Nothing to be alarmed about, nothing that we can't manage, but it will change. And then the other item is supplies. Although we show to have $177,000 in savings, December was a pretty expensive month for us in terms of parts for the buses. So we're projecting through December to be more along the lines of even on our supply budget. So again, just trying to paint a picture of not only where we're at currently with what you're looking at in your budget to actual in your packet, but also what staff is seeing that's going to be coming to the trust in the following month.
What about fuel, Jason?
Yeah, so fuel is one too, that we are exceeding our budget. You can see that we're about $58,000 over what we had anticipated through 5 months of the fiscal year. That's consistent with what we saw the previous months, where we have slowly started seeing our expenses exceed our fuel budget. I don't know at this point that that's something we would include in the budget amendment, but we certainly would be looking at probably including some additional funds for personnel costs, but we'll continue to monitor that. And then looking at parking, if there's no questions on the transportation or no other questions, direct your attention to the parking operations on page 4. And again, drawing your attention to kind of the bottom line, our operating loss or income, you can see that through 5 months of the fiscal year, we actually have revenues in excess of expenditures by about $800,000. And I did want to make sure that I pointed out that the billing the Republic Parking sends us for managing the garages, that those payments are all current and in sync with the budget. So that excess that we see essentially reflects all of our bills being paid current. So most of that, looking at the revenues, you can see is coming from overages in transient revenue and event revenue. So we've done significantly better in those two revenue categories than what we had anticipated. Keeping in mind, we did build the budget on a pretty conservative basis. And then the other side, the other contributing factor to having that excess of revenue is the amount of savings we're seeing on our parking garage operations. And that's due primarily to less staff. One, it's obviously harder to recruit staff in our current environment, but excuse me, mainly it's due to the fact that our operations do not require as much staffing as what they previously did before we had some of the technology we have now in our garages that allow us to operate our garages for events without necessarily having to have the same level of staffing that we might have had to have a couple of years ago. So all that's contributing to having, at least through 5 months of the fiscal year, a pretty good rebound, if you will, in our parking operations. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions on the financials.
Are there any questions for Jason regarding the financials? Well, I would entertain a motion to receive the financial reports for November. Next item on our agenda is to receive the program reports. I understand we have a presentation for the parking services report.
Right, we have
so
one presentation this morning.
Welcome, Corey.
This will be a quick presentation. I don't know how to move the slide. We've done a lot of behind-the-scenes matters, but since last spoke to this venue, Kimley Horn completed a parking study just over a year and a half ago. 2 years ago, pre-COVID. That GIS software called Kimley Horn's Park Plus has been installed on the city system. That assists staff with where all the parking spaces and modeling for if there was a new land development to calculate parking needs and whatnot. Our SCADA system for garage parking was updated to version 12.8. The reason I bring that up was it was mostly a Windows and some hot patches and whatnot, but the software update went without a single customer knowing that it occurred, which is significant in my world. In that update,
Careful, Corey, we'll have you handle the next utility billing system update.
You got me. With this update, a really cool feature from a parking perspective is it has an integrated accounts receivable system for our monthly parkers. So that's currently active. It's currently being managed, in which a customer will be able to go online, enter into their account, and pay with a credit card, and then we can auto charge that credit card. Versus what we're currently running at 2 independent systems, which requires redundant audits. And then with the help of the Thunder, we have integrated Ticketmaster into our SCADA system. So season ticket holders that pay for that get parking in advance, they're getting a mobile via the Thunder's mobile app for their venues. They'll get their parking pass and be able to scan in and out. And just a few days ago, we started selling where somebody could go buy a single ticket from Ticketmaster and retrieve a parking pass. Fun for me. And then earlier this year, the trust allowed us to replace the parking gates that became obsolete. Each one of those gates it collectively did this 600,000 times over the 10 years. The new gates, we have all but 11 to be installed at the Sheridan Walker Garage and then the Century Center Garage. Lastly, the modifications for the Prairie Surf are underway. We ran into some snafus with supply chain, but just yesterday they were drilling a hole through the concrete slab in order to bring conduit out. It was 17 degrees when those guys were out there working yesterday morning. So we're hoping that'll finish up in the next couple of weeks. Questions?
Corey, I just wanted to, is that software, that GIS software, that Park Plus, now do we share that with other departments like planning?
Yes, the city and planning department have it, and so does CAPA.
Okay, if there are no questions for Corey, I would entertain a motion to receive our program reports. And the program reports are received. Are there any items from the trustees? Trustee Cooper?
Just wanted to say thank you for everyone's patience this morning. I ended up staying up till about 1 o'clock in the morning creating my new semester syllabus for 5 different classes with the surprise that Oklahoma City University, where I also teach in addition to UCO, will be transitioning to online classes because of the Omicron variant and our rising numbers. in terms of hospitalizations and cases. And so I ended up staying up till like 1 o'clock in the morning and waking up a little bit late this morning. So I really appreciate everyone's patience with me. And that's also my way of saying to all of our Embark workers, particularly our operators on the buses and those who are working to keep them clean, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. We just heard from Corey about his staff being out in way below freezing temperatures, and I want to say thank you to them as well. But please, everyone, continue to take seriously this historic global pandemic. When appropriate, wear a mask and keep yourself and others safe. And just want to say happy 2022 and just thanks for the opportunity to serve with all of you.
Trustee McElhaney? Trustee Bryant? Trustee Hill? I do have a couple of comments, and the first one is the transit system is one of the unsung heroes, I think, of the city, and one of those heroic efforts was undertaken a week ago Saturday when the temperature dropped dramatically, and the Homeless Alliance has a practice of emptying the shelter for a brief period in the afternoon in order to change over to a nighttime operation. And Jason was requested and sent a bus to provide a warming facility for those occupants of the shelter so that they could have a place that's warm while that is changing over. I do understand there's some work underway to possibly reduce that amount of time that the shelter would be in that changeover mode, but Jason has had staff assigned to kind of monitor that so that we don't have to provide that service on an emergency basis. It could be routinely provided in the event that the shelter is facing those types of dramatically low temperatures. So I wanted to thank him for that. And then Jason, especially given Councilman Trustee Cooper's comments, this might be a good time for us to talk about the status of our staff at Embark and what could happen in the event that this pandemic continues to affect our staffing.
Yeah, happy to address that. So, you know, with our staff, I mean, let me back up. I mean, we all realize that at the state level, at the city level, and now, you know, within our own employment centers, we're seeing cases of COVID dramatically increase. And, you know, at Embark, it's not that different. I mean, we started the week with approximately 3 individuals that were either had COVID or were in quarantine, right, because they'd been exposed. As of yesterday, that number was closer to 17, you know. So, again, similar to what we've seen. As a senior leadership team, we've met this week, and at least how we're managing that situation at our transit facilities is we're going to reinstitute a lot of the measures that we had in place kind of at the onset of the pandemic. And, you know, those measures are going to include anything from allowing more opportunities for spacing within our facilities so that we can not only continue to keep encouraging our employees to distance, but provide enough space for them to distance. So we're moving, for example, our training class to another location so we can free up a training room for employees to congregate, if you will, but at a distance. So that's one thing. The other thing we're doing is we're reinstating our telework program. So just about anybody that can telework, we're encouraging or requiring to telework. We are going to temporarily shut our transit facility down to public access. That doesn't mean we won't engage the public at all, but we're not going to have just a open door policy, right? They'll need to make an appointment in advance, and we've done this before, so we're just reinstituting measures that we've already successfully executed. And then finally, the second phase of that, if you will, and things that we're still considering and discussing is reinstituting mandatory temperature checks as employees come in the building, and evaluating putting some of the capacity constraints back on the buses. Again, just for the safety of all those that are involved. So we feel like we're moving rather quickly with some of the things that we've done and decided on this week, and we'll continue to put measures in place next week. Interestingly enough, based on the timing of the question, after this meeting, I'll be actually preparing a video to address our organization on these changes. So in addition to the video message that they'll receive through the electronic newsletter that each employee receives on Sunday, we'll be broadcasting this information on our electronic message boards and having meetings with employees. So now, I think part of the question was, what could happen if we continue to see, particularly bus operators that are not able to report to work. There could be a chance that we could miss some service. Again, giving all the credit we possibly can to our employees, that hasn't been an issue. We've been able to provide the service that we've committed to the community to provide. But the reality is there could be some routes that we miss. We'll monitor those. We'll let our customers know what the situation is if they're calling in looking for a bus that didn't arrive. But that's kind of the first phase, if you will, of the consequences of not having, for example, enough bus operators, if we get to that point.
And Jason, I just really want to emphasize that while capacity restrictions are never something that we take for granted, and we know they're not convenient for our customers, if our bus operators continue to get sick at an alarming rate, there won't be any routes for them to run. So I think that it's important for us to recognize that keeping our operators healthy has to be a high priority for us. Our customers are important to us too. Their health, their safety, their well-being, their ability to get to their destination. But without protecting our operators, that could be impaired. So, all right, thanks, Jason.
Yep.
All right, if there's nothing else, we will be adjourned.